Saudi Arabia might be cooked, Australia might be back, and Japan actually dropped points. Welcome to Deadball TV's AFC October recap for Group C. Guys, before I get into my team-by-team takeaways, be sure to please drop the video a like, hit subscribe if you want more Asian footy content here on Deadball TV, and let me know your biggest takeaway down below in the comments from Group C. It could be a player, manager, event, whatever you want it to be. And lastly, check us out on social media. The link is in the description. I gotta start with Saudi Arabia, the most down bad team in Group C, and yes, they are more down bad than China, which is an achievement nobody wants to win. Lost to Japan for the first time ever on Saudi Arabian soil, conceded the first goals to Japan ever on Saudi soil, drew Bahrain in a game that was genuinely 50-50 and could have easily been a loss if not for some good goalkeeping performances. Salem Al-Dasari misses yet another penalty. He's now 0 for 2 in round 3, and Saudi Arabia, through their first 3 home games, have 0 wins and just 2 points. I mean, it's a disaster. The reports I'm seeing online is that Roberto Mancini is already done and that really Saudi Arabia is just looking to try to appoint Hervé Renard, or at least a replacement, before making his dismissal official, and it's time, bro. Honestly, it's been time for probably 6 months now. Now, the irony about this Mancini out movement is that if we're being fair to him, if Salem Al-Dasari makes both of his penalties, then Saudi Arabia beat Indonesia at home, and they probably beat Bahrain in this game as well, which means they have 4 more points than they currently do, which would put them on 9 points total, 1 point behind Japan in the standings. I always say it, football is a game of margins. And right now, the margins, they ain't going the Saudis' way. And that's probably because this team doesn't really want Mancini to continue as the manager. Like, it's kind of obvious that they're not playing at their full capacity. Some positives for Saudi Arabia, though. I thought Al-Tambakti, the center back, was a beast against Bahrain, arguably their man of the match in that game. Musab Al-Jawer, I mean, the dude is a baller. How he didn't start the game in Bahrain is one of the biggest fumbles I've seen from Mancini. And Abdullah Radif, I mean, at least start the man. At least he brings something to the attack. I thought he looked lively against Bahrain, something that Saudi Arabia pretty much missed entirely in that 2-0 defeat against Japan. Now, the rest of the team, specifically the attack, is pretty bad. I don't know how else to describe them outside of awful. I thought Nasser Al-Dasari, Salem's fake brother, was a disaster against Bahrain. Like, he was a substitute, and he should have been subbed off as a substitute. That's genuinely how bad he was. Al-Burakan, I mean, the guy is just a plank of wood up top. I haven't seen a good Al-Burakan game. Actually, I've never seen a good Al-Burakan game. Why this guy keeps starting is an absolute mystery to me. And then, of course, Salem, bro, one of the gems in the Middle East, an absolute baller, an icon to Asian football. He just can't score anymore. It pains me because if you look at the vision, if you look at the chance creation off the dribble, he's still one of the best in the AFC, but the dude might be the worst shooter in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia simply cannot score, and as long as they cannot score, they're going to continue to be susceptible to upsets. We've played 3 games, ladies and gentlemen, and Saudi Arabia have 3 goals. 3 goals total. That's the same goal output as North Korea, Kuwait, and Bahrain. China have more goals than Saudi Arabia. That is, dissolve the team. The more I talk about it, the more heated I get. Like, I've had enough. And if I've had enough, I can't even imagine how the Saudi diehards feel. I mean, it's crazy. They got Australia and Indonesia away in the next windows. They got a doubleheader away from home. Anything short of 4 points, and these guys are completely cooked. Now, the opposite of cooked, I guess raw, you could say even sushi raw, is the Japanese national team, who had a very strong game overall against Saudi Arabia. Of course, the scoreline in the end wasn't super flattering. It was a close game, but the fact that they made history in beating Saudi Arabia in the King Abdullah for the first time ever, like, we shouldn't downplay that achievement. I thought Hinemasa Morita and Wataru Endo were absolute class in the midfield, especially. Endo was kind of missing, honestly, against Australia in that second match. Now, against Australia in the 1-1 draw, like, what do y'all want me to say about the Shogo Taniguchi own goal? It's an abomination. It's one of the worst own goals I've ever seen. Zion Suzuki, there's nothing he can do about it. Australia created nothing. These things are gonna happen, man. It's football. It's honestly poetry in motion, because this exact same thing happened to Australia against Bahrain at home in the first match. The only difference being that Australia lost. Like, it's just not your day. It's not meant to be when your opponent has 0 shots on target and you draw the game 1-1. And if that own goal doesn't happen, then I fully believe that Japan go on to win the game. I mean, I thought when they introduced Keito Nakamura and Junya Ito, Nakamura especially, those guys were just tearing it up against Australia, and they were able to get the equalizer, another own goal from Cameron Burgess, the own goal derby. Maybe that's what we'll start calling Japan versus Australia. I'm not worried, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The only thing I want to ask is how much longer do Junya Ito and Nakamura come off the bench? Because I do not know how much longer you can rationalize starting Ritsu Doan. That's the one that I just see, and I'm just a monkey scratching my head. I'm like, I don't get how this guy is starting for Japan. Even Kubo, like I thought Kubo was okay against Australia, but we still haven't really seen Real Sociedad Kubo for the Samurai Blue. And I don't really know what my theory is for why that's happening. If you guys have one, please let me know in the comments. There was one amazing opportunity for Japan to basically score the first goal and kind of put the game away, but Minamino is unable to find Kaoru Mitoma on a break, and that was kind of Japan's, probably one of their better chances created the entire game. Australia are good defensively. It's a rivalry game. It ends in a draw. We can all chill. Shock draw aside, Japan are still hands down the best team in qualifying so far. 15 goals scored. Nobody else has scored more than 8, and 1 goal conceded is tied with Iran for the best defense in round 3. I fully expect the addition of Takahiro Tomiyasu, if he ever gets healthy, to improve the back 3 of Japan even further, and at that point, I would love to see what they look like, but they might be actually unstoppable then. Moving on to Australia, the Socceroos, the Subway Socceroos. I love how they're called that online. Name a better sponsorship than Subway and the Australian national team. Go ahead, I'll wait. I know it's only been 2 games, but I think that there were some notable improvements under Tony Popovich, the new manager. Obviously, there was the 3-1 win against China. I mean, you could say that Australia conceded a goal, but they only conceded 1 chance and 1 goal the entire game, which is unfortunately kind of becoming a theme for Australia, but they battled back very well, equalized right before the half ends, and then Craig Goodwin has an absolute screamer. I saw some Socceroo fans saying that the football was still a little dead in this window, especially against China, and that it's not really exciting, but I would say as an outsider that I'm not surprised by that, because if you look at the actual profile of Australian players, there's really not a lot of razzle-dazzle here. Like, I'm not saying they're serving like boiled chicken with no seasoning at all, but I don't know if there's anything outside of salt and maybe a little bit of pepper in this Australian attack. There's certainly no paprika, there's no curry powder, they ain't got no basil. I mean, there's really not a lot that Popovich can do, right? Like, he opened the cupboard in the kitchen, he looked at everything that was left, and he said, okay, I got salt and some expired pepper. It's not even fresh. I mean, it's stale now. Let me see what I can do. Let me try to whip up a stew with this. And he did. And you still got the 3 points in the China game, and then a great draw away, as defensively as the performance was, against Japan. Like, you cannot ask for more than 4 points from Australia in this window, or you're a lunatic. I don't know if I'm concerned or proud that Australia seemed to be back as kind of like the shithouse team in Asia. Like, it was such a good defensive performance against Japan in a rivalry game that gotta be looking at them and saying, like, are they back? I'm not quite ready to say they're back. I need to see what they do in the next window. I believe they have Saudi Arabia. God, that's either going to be the worst game of all time. Well, actually, it's going to be the worst game of all time. But if Australia win that game, then their qualifying is right back on track. If they can keep some clean sheets, which they haven't been able to do outside of Indonesia, they only have 1 clean sheet from their first 4, which is very anti-Australian, I would say. But if they keep a clean sheet or 2 clean sheets in the next window, they might be right back towards the top of the Asian football pyramid. I thought Popovich already has made some pretty ballsy decisions as Australian manager, namely to start Jason Gurria in the back 3 against Japan, and the dude was a warhorse. I mean, I thought he was clearly the man of the match for Australia. He was so good. Why this guy only has like 8 caps or something, I'm really not sure. He also benched Irakunda and didn't even play him against Japan, which I'm gonna say was the right decision. You guys can beef with me in the comments. I don't think Irakunda was doing anything against Japan. There were no counter-attacking opportunities for Irakunda to even participate in, and he doesn't have the defensive work rate as a Riley McGree. So I think it was actually a really good decision from Popovich to just leave him on the bench. He also benched Craig Goodwin after having maybe the best goal of round 3 qualifying so far. And again, if we're talking about how Australia needed to survive the Japanese divine wind, I think dropping Goodwin was the right decision. I was a little stunned that he dropped Keanu Bacchus for Luke Bratton against Japan, and even that decision didn't backfire. So I really don't have any criticism from Popovich whatsoever from this window. I thought it was an A-plus job from him. Let's move on to China. And do I owe China an apology? Maybe I do. They lost to Australia 3-1 away, and I'm not surprised by that at all, given the state of this Chinese national team. But then to go and beat Indonesia 2-1 at home, that's a big deal, man. And I tried to tell y'all in my predictions video that even though China, offensively at least, are completely finished, they will still be very annoying to beat at home. You could even say against Saudi Arabia, they were a little unlucky. I mean, when do you concede a brace to a center back off set pieces? That's like a 1 in 1,000 chance of happening. So I feel like they were a little unlucky against Saudi Arabia to not at least get a draw there. And now their fortune has turned around and they've beaten the Indonesians and given the entire Asian internet at least a couple days of peace and tranquility. There is one moment in this game I have to highlight because the pass from Juni Gao for China's second goal is prime Luka Modric at Real Madrid or like 2014 World Cup. I mean, it's probably the best assist I've ever seen on the Asian continent. I'm not kidding. I was looking at my boy Gao. He's got 3 assists for China in his last 7 games with the national team as a right back. So I'm not going to tell their manager what to do, but maybe play that guy a bit more. Just a thought. Just an idea from a YouTuber. I don't know. China defensively are still very vulnerable, and attacking wise they're still kind of dead, but I do like that Branko Ivankovic has kind of experimented with some of the attacking players. He clearly realized that the old crop wasn't good enough, and I think at least at home China are going to be a mild challenge for every single team in this group. Like, if you guys think Bahrain is just going to go into China and steamroll them, you're dead wrong. So despite me proclaiming the Chinese national team completely dead, courtesy of the Indonesian national team, they're actually right back in the race to qualify. Now, I don't think they will, but at least things have gotten a little bit more interesting. Now, I think it's time we move on to Indonesia, and let me just get this out of the way now because I'm going to be asked about it in the comments. You were not robbed against Bahrain. Honestly, y'all just gotta stop. It's completely embarrassing, their reaction online about an extra 3 minutes being added on to a game. It's like y'all have never seen footy before and have never seen extra time go over the allotted time. I could understand and be way more sympathetic if the decision was +6, right? And the ref ended up playing like +12 or 13, but it was +3 minutes, bro. Not only was it +3 minutes, you guys should have put the game away in the 97th minute when you had a 3-on-1 and you couldn't complete a 5-yard pass to, I think it was Ragnar, who was wide open. You should have put the game away then. So don't come online after the fact and start crying online because your players couldn't put away a 3-on-1 and because you couldn't defend one more set piece. I thought defending crosses has been Indonesia's biggest strength through qualifying so far. You guys have allowed nothing from wide play from your opponents except for Bahrain in this one example in the 98th minute. How is Ali Marhoun getting on the end of a cross? He's the shortest guy on the pitch. I'm not going to discuss this anymore in the video. Like, go back. There were stoppages during extra time. The ref made it very clear he was keeping track of this unplayed time and added it on to the end, and it ended up being 99. Maybe it should have been 98. It doesn't matter. Defend the cross and you win the game. Let's have a little bit of objectivity here. Like, you didn't lose because of the ref. You lost because you were outshot 24-5 in this game. Like, I think to just chalk this up to the ref being trash is so lazy and it's so biased. And I know biases in football come hand in hand, but I'm just not having any of it. Like, I think most of y'all just mad because you were in my comment section in the last video saying Indonesia was easily going to take 6 points from this window. Like, I genuinely had comments like that with hundreds of upvotes, and I think this was a bit of a humbling, and honestly a needed humbling for Indonesia. I don't know if that attitude rubbed off on the Indonesian team in the China match, but some of y'all think I don't like Indonesia, and that's not true at all. I do like this national team. I do think it's really cool seeing, any team from Southeast Asia doing well. But if you think for 1 second I'm going to lie or not be objective about my thoughts regarding this national team, you might as well unsubscribe, or dislike the video. Just leave me alone. I'm never gonna do it. There's plenty of YouTubers out there who sim for Indonesia. I ain't one of them. So if that's what you're looking for, I'm afraid Deadball TV is not the place for you. Now that we've got that out of the way, we can finally talk about the footy again. And I think the biggest takeaway from a footballing standpoint for Indonesia is that they got to experience in this window what it feels like to be the bigger team in a match. In the first round against Australia and Saudi Arabia, Indonesia really didn't have to play ball. They just kind of got to sit back and counter. They weren't able to do that against China. And that's why said during my predictions that even though Indonesia have been very strong defensively, there's no guarantee that these guys can play good attacking football because we've never seen it. And so after they conceded the first 2 goals against China, that was always going to be an impossible mountain to climb for a team that just doesn't score. After scoring the 2 goals, China said, bet, have the ball, do whatever you want. And Indonesia had 76% possession in this game. And what did they do with that? 0 big chances created, exactly as I feared. I say it again, it's way easier in football to defend than to attack. And this Indonesian team is not set up to attack. I don't know where the goals are going to come from in this team, honestly. Like, I know Stroik scored a banger against Bahrain, and congratulations to him. It was a bit overdue. But outside of that, who's going to score? Is Ragnar going to score all the goals? Are we going to have Marcelino start scoring goals? Because he's got 2 for the national team. It's a big question mark, and it's a massive hurdle, massive puzzle that Shin Tae-yong is eventually going to have to answer. There's going to come a time in qualifying where drawing is not going to be enough for Indonesia, and they have to win. You could argue the next window is that time. Now, the pitch in Jakarta is terrible, so that will benefit Indonesia because Japan and Saudi Arabia, they are very heavy possession teams, but I'm kind of thinking Indonesia has to win one of these games if they want to qualify for the World Cup, and that is no guarantee. Like, do not be surprised if it's 2 L's for Indonesia next window. And lastly, we can talk about Bahrain, and these boys, bro, they barely want to play ball. Bahrain is easily the most emotional, the most diva, the most dramatic team in qualifying. I thought Ali Marhoun, specifically in the Saudi Arabia game, had a dive late in the second half that genuinely should have been a red card. I mean, it's absolute pure cheating at that point. It's just trying to play the ref. The fact that he wasn't even given a yellow, I thought was a bit shameful. These guys, they're just gonna do it the Bahrain way. And you know what? I'm not Bahraini, so for me, I think it's despicable most of the time. But guess who will not care 1 ounce? The actual Bahrain fans. They just want to make the World Cup. They don't care how ugly it is. They don't care what their possession stats say. They don't care how many penalties or own goals they have to score to make it. They just want to play at the 2026 World Cup. And honestly, after 4 games, they're well on their way to doing so. The embarrassing dive aside, I did think Ali Marhoun was very good and went beast mode for his country in this window, scoring a brace against Indonesia, including a free kick from some distance. And that was a massive draw for Bahrain. Like, they could not have afforded to lose to Indonesia in Rifa. And I gotta say, in their first 2 games at Rifa, they've looked slow and lethargic and just so open at the back. I mean, the defending on the goal from Stroik, I've never seen a unit defend so poorly in my life. Like, this team has problems, but they're so annoying, and they have just enough counterattacking threat and talent up top to where they're going to stay in every single match. I thought against Saudi Arabia, the backline was a little bit better, and Laftula, the goalkeeper, obviously had the penalty save against Al-Dasari, which was massive, and these guys held on for the point, and there was a couple moments throughout the match where they almost terrorized their way to a victory away in Riyadh. It would have been insane, and Mancini would surely already be gone by time of recording. So are Bahrain good? No. But they're so annoying, and they're so good at getting in the heads of their opposition that they're going to be one of these nightmare teams that nobody wants to play, and they might just do dark arts enough to somehow end up in round 4 and maybe even the 2026 World Cup. 4 points from their opening 2 road games of qualifying is more than they could have asked for. I do think they need to start being a little bit better at home, but 4 games in, they're completely on track. But anyways, y'all, those are my thoughts on Group C, my honest, unadulterated, unfiltered thoughts about all 6 teams in Group C of AFC qualifying after the October window. If there's something I said that you guys disagree with, or a point I made that you think is amazing, let me know down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop it a like, hit subscribe for more Asian footy content here on Deadball TV. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.